In the last lesson, we have seen some probable proof that the Catholic Church is the true Church of Christ. And we call this probable proof because we're going to show further proofs that she truly is the Church of Christ. Now we have seen the fact too that only the Catholic Church have shown signs which Christ really gave His Church. Like for instance, we are the only ones who have a Pope, the rock in which Christ had built His Church, giving the Holy Father the powers precisely which Christ gave the rock. Secondly, we have seen also the fact that only the Catholic Church behave like its master, like Christ. And thirdly, we have shown you the fact that when Christ says, "I will be with you until the consummation of the world," only the Catholic Church can physically point in a visible way that Christ is truly among us. These lessons and this probable proof that we are giving you is meant to strengthen the conviction of Catholics that they are truly in the true Church of Christ. To see how so many Catholics are fleeing the Church and joining other denominations, the number is just staggering. And the reason is quite obvious. They are not convinced Catholics. We call them, in previous lessons, accidental Catholics. Catholics who became Catholics by accident of birth and for no other reason. Now let us look for another probable proof that the Catholic Church is a true church and ask this question: is the Catholic Church treated in its history, was it treated in exactly the same way as Christ was treated? It is the Catholic Church and the Catholic Church alone that has suffered universal distrust, as if the whole world hated the Catholic Church. It is said, for instance, that the Council of Churches at the beginning, that is the League of all Christian denominations, while they invited all Christian denominations to join them, excluded the Catholic Church. In certain countries, for instance, the priests are not allowed to wear the clerical garb, and to do so would be a sign of rebellion. Spain and Ireland, for instance, has been ostracized by the whole world simply because they were thoroughly Catholic. Now this precisely is how Christ was treated, and that is how Christ prophesied His Catholic Church would be treated in exactly the same way as He was treated. You will be hated by all men. No denomination here in the world can ever brag that all men hates them. Maybe they're hated in their country, but not by the whole world. Not even any non-Christian denomination can brag that they are hated by all men. Only the Catholic Church can boast that the whole world have hated her the way the world have hated her master. And when we say all men have hated her, we don't mean criminals and atheists and sinners. Precisely, it is these people who are the friends of the church. The one who hates her are sober-minded people, civilized people, educated people, intellectual people, who even consider it a service to God to drag the members of the Catholic Church to both religious and civil courts. We had seen several signs, probable signs, that the Catholic Church is the true Church of Christ. Another sign would be that the Catholic Church has bad eggs. But then the bad eggs within the Catholic Church is further proof that it is truly the Church of Christ. After all, the first members of the Catholic Church, the apostolic community, had a bad egg, Judas. And the history of the Catholic Church is filled with bad eggs. There is Torquemada, the head of the Inquisition. Oh, you just cannot imagine what he did to the Jews in Spain, sending them away from Spain to their own homeland, so much so that so many of them died during the journey. Some of them went to the Vatican, to Rome, where Pope Alexander kept them and protected them the way Pius XII kept and protected and helped the Jewish people during the time of the Nazis. Torquemada was a really bad page in the history of the Catholic Church. Then, of course, there is Bishop Cauchon, the bishop who sold Joan of Arc to the British. He sold Joan of Arc, Saint Joan of Arc of France, to the British for a price. The price given to him by the British Catholics, unfortunately, was a promotion in the ecclesiastical office. When St. Thomas More was condemned by a jury to be beheaded, St. Thomas More, patron saint of politicians and lawyers, the jury of 3 were made of 1 bishop and 1 abbot, and I don't know the third one. So you see, Christ had really prophesied that his church would be like a giant net getting both the good and the bad fishes. And we are filled with good and bad fishes. The Catholic Church has never claimed that she is a society of selected souls who are holy and perfect. No, she's like a big net that sweeps everything. So she includes good and the bad, sinners and the saints, contemplative souls sitting side by side with the most deformed monstrosity of carnality. But that is precisely the message of the Catholic Church, that the charity of Christ in the Catholic Church is larger than the charity of men, that we are going to embrace all kinds of people, especially those rejected by other denominations or other associations. And that's precisely why she is called Catholic, which means universal, because she embraces everybody. So another probable sign that the Catholic Church is truly the Church of Christ is that it contains both good and bad fishes. And so when you look at the history of the Catholic Church, you see on one side Saint Francis of Assisi, and on the other side you see Pope Innocent VIII. Do you recall how Pope Innocent VIII was elected? Well, they say it was the most deplorable annal in the history of the Catholic Church, because during his election outside the Vatican, there was a mob, sort of people's power, demanding their choice candidates. And as of course the conclave began, the one electing the Pope was a bunch of oligarchy, rich people, who became cardinals. And because the candidates were always getting the same vote, Cardinal della Rovere bribed all the cardinals, all without exception, to elect his candidate for the papacy. And then when the Pope was elected, he appointed so many cardinals whose lives were described as dissolute. It would have placed the Church into such a shameful situation. The news you hear today about priests and bishops are nothing compared to what was happening during that time. All the cardinals he appointed were misfits. One of them was even a 13-year-old boy. But then if you put this side by side with Saint Francis of Assisi and his followers, that is how the Catholic Church looked like, because that is how the net that Christ threw into the sea would look like after he pulls it out. The reason why we are losing so much Catholics to other denominations is because Catholics cannot find a church. We cannot find hands that would feed us with the commands of Christ. We cannot find people who would forgive our sins, because it seems that the sins we confess are always present in our soul. It never disappears. We cannot find a church that behaves like Christ, brutally frank and very clear in its message. What we hear around us are trumpets of different sound, and we are not sure what it is saying. And therefore it is an obligation for each one of us to find the true church. And since the Church of Christ is made up of both good and bad, let us try to be on the side of what is good. For even when we find a church, let us work so hard to be faithful subject of the King, Christ the King, and pious children of her Queen, the Catholic Church. God bless you.